This is a production of Cornell University.
Mary Howell-Martens.
A major funder of Cornell University. Our daughter is in veterinary school. So we've been at this supporting Cornell now for almost 7 years. Thank you very much for inviting us here. It's always a pleasure to come back. It's always a pleasure to come back to this room because I remember clearly coming to seminars myself as a student here. And it's a very interesting coming full circle to come back a number of years later and talk about what we have accomplished and what we are doing and what our plans are going to be, because we are far from done. We are definitely in a growth phase on our farm and a generational succession on our farm. Our son is taking over a great deal of it. And our younger son is taking much more leadership at the feed mill. So we have a lot of plans of things that are changing and coming up in both of our businesses. And it's exciting. It's exciting to be on the cutting edge. But it's also exciting to have been in organic farming in upstate New York for the past 25, 30 years and seen the changes, because it is truly inspiring to see this many people at Cornell truly involved, engaged in organic farming research, and interested in organic farming production in upstate New York.
It's a lot of fun when we speak in the Midwest, because farmers are envious of our state university being Cornell. Cornell has taken us further ahead in organic than, I think I'm biased, but I also think I'm correct, has actually helped us jump ahead much further and made more scientific progress in understanding the how and why of organic farming, along with soil health, of any school there is. And what's especially fun is to be in Iowa and have Iowa State alumnus come up and tell me that they envy us for being here.
A little background on our operation. We do farm 1,600 acres of certified organic grain crops. We farm a lot of different crops, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. We'll show you a whole list of everything that we grew, which is pretty impressive. We've been farming organically, certified organic, since 1992. So we have been, Klaas is a farmer from way back. He grew up on a farm. He was a dairy farmer. When we got married, we were looking for ways to make the farm more profitable, and organic seemed to be a nice niche that would be something that we could make a little extra money in. It was very appealing to our perspective, our philosophy, and so it was a very easy thing for us to decide to go into in the early 90s, before there were really good markets for organic grain crops. But it was something that we felt strongly would grow, and it did. The first few farmers in this area who were farming grain organically didn't have good markets, but by the time we reached a critical mass of quantity and quality, suddenly the buyers came here, and our markets definitely grew.
The first really big benefit we saw from organic farming was the markets. We knew from our observation, our experience, and our financial records that when we had a diverse system on our farm, a wide variety of crops in rotation, that our crops were more profitable, had less problems, required less inputs. The big problem with that was that in the conventional market, some of our rotation crops were only marginally more profitable to grow than to take to the elevator than they were to just mow them and trash them, because there was just no demand. When we got into the certified organic market, we started having buyers calling us asking for things that we did not have markets for before. So there's a real important concept that we found with biodiversity, that if you don't have the market, you're not going to have the diversity on your farm. So certified organic under NOP rules is a tremendous marketing tool, because it opens those doors and allows us to have more flexibility as to what we grow.
In 1996, the first organic dairy farmers came to in upstate New York came to us and said, "Now you've got grain, and we know somebody else who has a mixer grinder and a blower truck. Could you start making feed for us?" And there were maybe 3, maybe 4 farms at that point. No big deal. We thought we could probably do this, and we did. But by 2001, we had over 100 customers, and we were seriously pressing at the boundaries of what we could do on our farm. At the same point, Agway, the big cooperative in the Northeast, was going bankrupt and selling off all their property. And they came to us and said, we've got this feed mill here in Penyan, and we'd like to get rid of it. Would you like to buy it? And we looked at each other and said, what would we want a feed mill for? And we bought it. At that point, it had been really run into the ground. If anything had broken, if anything had spilled, if anything had gotten misplaced over the past 10, 15 years, people just walked away from it. It was a mess. We hired one of our local Mennonite young men to help us clean it up, and we cleaned and cleaned and cleaned and tried to figure out where all the switches went to, and which wires were still good and which were not. And it took us 6 months, but within 6 months we were able to start grinding certified organic feed. At that point, we thought we could hire Daniel, the Mennonite kid, part-time, and maybe just do a little bit of feed now and then. But within a couple of years, we realized that was not reasonable, and we started hiring more employees. Now we have 12 employees. We've got 2 trucks on the road full-time, and we are grinding and shipping more feed out of Lakeview than Agway ever did, even in their heyday, and it is entirely certified organic feed. It is, a lot of it's dairy. It goes all over upstate New York and northern Pennsylvania, but increasingly we've got a market for the backyard folks, the backyard chicken folks, the backyard small animal, pig, sheep and goat, and also seed. So we ship pallets all over the Northeast by common carrier. And it's gotten to be quite a business, a lot bigger than we expected it to get to be. And it's been an interesting kind of wild ride. But what the neat thing is that it's all certified organic grain, and we buy as much as possible from local farmers. This has allowed us to provide a market for a diversity of different certified organic grain crops from farmers, especially in a 50 to 75 mile radius around Penyan. It gives these farmers a reliable, well-paid market. We take their crops out of the field at harvest. We dry their corn and their other grains. We store it. We give them a sense of security, of reliability, of decency. We were talking on the way down about how sadly frequently farmers are dealt with dishonestly by their buyers and their suppliers. And we're seeing so much evidence of that right now with the farm crisis being accelerating. We've gotten a call on the way down from someone in Pennsylvania that Klaas is going to be speaking down there next week. And the financial crisis and the sense of panic is just reaching massive proportions because the Amish farms down there are losing their milk markets and they have no idea what to do. And they feel very much like they're being taken advantage of, that they're being lied to, that they're being mistreated. Well, from the very start, we committed that Lakeview would not do that we would treat our farmers honestly, reliably, we would be there as a partner, and we would provide good quality feed, we'd provide a good quality market, be the pivot that the organic community could count on to be honest and to be fair and to be high quality.
An overriding principle that we have discovered over the last 30 years is that when we have an agronomic problem that seems to defy solving, and this can include problems that even the best pesticides and things that are not allowed for organic farmers don't deal with. We have discovered that we can generally solve those problems by introducing the right new kind of new species, by adjusting the biodiversity. And that has really turned our farm around by having the discipline of not being able to use the quick fixes and the Band-Aids and the reactive approaches. We've had to look upstream. We've had to learn that what we see in our fields is due to what we've done there in the past. We have to look back and see what is the history and start seeing what we're looking at and taking the clues that nature gives us. For instance, and this is in the field of soil health, found that when growing dry beans, if we introduce yellow mustard or buckwheat, it almost completely eliminates the root rot pathogens. When we started growing dry beans on our farm, we thought it was like we found a way to print our own money. It was such a profitable crop. But by the second and third time we'd grown the dry beans in the same field, our yields had dropped in less than half. That's where Cornell came to the rescue. And I can't overstate what a big difference it has made to be able to go to our extension specialists and our researchers here in Ithaca with a problem and have them actually look at it and explain what's happening and help us design a plan. How do we change the system so that we can deal with the problem? Incidentally, after learning about the dry bean problem, and Georgia Bowie was instrumental in that, and this goes right to the soil health team, solving a lot of other problems, our dry bean yields actually doubled again and went higher than they had been before. And this is the importance of having a university. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but if we don't put the public funding back in public research, we're going to really miss the boat, because part of what put this country on the map is that we had a commitment and enough money to fund this kind of research that doesn't bring back immediate returns, but that produce much bigger returns downstream in the long run. Companies have a responsibility to make money. If it's really hard for them to spend money researching things where there's not an immediate payback. Yet when you look at the kind of research that's been done here, and then look at how that has stimulated business and stimulated things that were not possible before, we see that it's a tremendous payback for the taxpayer dollar.
We love technology. We're very much into it, and we'll talk to you more about this in a few minutes of what's about to arrive at our farm, which is really interesting. But this is not something new. We decided about 10 years ago to start putting solar panels on every available surface on our farm. At this point, all of the stationary energy, the non-mobile energy on our farm that we use is generated by solar. We also have 3 electric cars. And so most of our running around, it's amazing how infrequently a farmer actually needs a pickup truck. Most of the running around from field to field and to go get parts and to do a lot of the general driving on a farm doesn't need to be in a pickup truck. It can be in an EV car and run off solar. So we're trying very hard to reduce our energy use as much as we absolutely can. We've also brought in a good deal of European equipment for tillage that does less damage to the soil, that is more precise and camera and GPS guided for cultivation, so that it's each pass that we make in the field does the maximum amount of good with the least amount of soil damage or soil disruption. And what's coming hopefully tomorrow are the start of 6 containers of custom built seed cleaning equipment from China. We've been working, Klaas and our son Peter have been working with Chinese engineers since last summer to design a system of optical sorters and all sorts of other accessory equipment. It is a project of a proportion that we have never conceived of before. We had to put up 2 whole new buildings, and it's really something else. But it's where we're going with agriculture. We have to have the capacity, the infrastructure in order to be able to produce grain in accordance, in compliance with FSMA, the Food Modernization Safety Act. If we're going to get into more the food quality grains, we need to be able to do a better quality job of cleaning seed. We need to be able to handle and store grain in the most modern way possible. And we need to do this not just for us, but for others in the neighborhood so that we can provide markets for them.
One special appeal I'll make to our university is in GPS, not just the field mapping, but in helping farmers troubleshoot, helping farmers evaluate how it will fit on their farms. I think here's a role that extension could really make a difference in. We've got a model of selling machinery in this country that is appropriate for the 1900s, but it's not appropriate for today. And that's to sell as much iron as you can and be busy selling the third piece while your first customer is struggling to make what you sold them work. We really need independent advisors who help farmers select what they're going to do to be sure that it pays back. And GPS for us is an example. It's a cute quip, but it's true. Don't ask me to correct this problem. I just spent correct this mistake. I just spent a fortune making it. Well, I did that with our GPS, and it took a son who had been in Europe and was able to tell Dad, "Hey, you screwed up. Just admit it," to figure this out. It tends to, human nature is to double down on these mistakes and not admit it. But where my mistake was, I thought that GPS, because of its accuracy, could control cultivation. And I'm still convinced it could, but the truth is there are better ways to do it. Just because you can do something in a certain way doesn't mean we should stop looking at how else could we do it. And the next level is camera guidance. And this is where technology is taking us forward in quantum leaps. Now, the first camera guidance that worked and worked well was looking for contrast, where they mounted the camera a known distance above the ground, and it looked for parallel lines the right distance apart, which it could identify as rows. And when it worked well, it was more accurate than a human being. In fact, when they didn't work when it wasn't quite as accurate as we wanted it to be, the manufacturer told me something that was counterintuitive. He said, "Speed up. You get more data points and you'll be more accurate." You know, people just can't do something that fast. And the resolution of these cameras allows them to see the crop when it's so small that at my age, when I need glasses, I probably can't see as good as the camera can. But that's only the beginning. Now, just because this thing works perfectly when we're trying it out in the test, doesn't mean that we can turn an untrained employee on it and have it work day in and day out. And this is where we need to continue to make advances. What we learned, I just give this example, is that when the sun was at a right angle to the cultivator and you were going in one direction, you were fine. When you turned it around, it would go crazy because you had the shadow on the machine plus the strobe effect of the cleats on the tires turning, which really confused it. Our son just solved this working with the company by putting a camera on both sides. It was about a $200 modification, plus it took a little software code. But the salesman didn't tell us that. This is where we really need to have the university get out in front again.
About 5 years ago, we were asked to come down and give a seminar to the Alliance for Science folks here at Cornell, to organic farmers. I think they expected us to waddle in Frankenfish outfits. We didn't. And we asked a series of questions. And one of them was, and I'm not pointing fingers whatsoever, but those of us in agriculture need to think about where we draw the circle around what constitutes success. If you go to the local coffee shop in any rural farming community and all the farmers are bellying up there to their coffee cups, you know, you're going to hear 200 bushel corn, 230 bushel corn, 225 bushel corn. You're going to hear that and that alone. You might hear some dairy farmers talking about their milk yield, but that's about all you're going to hear. You're going to hear that success is quantity, and it is measurable in bushels or gallons or hundredweight, but you're not going to talk about you're not going to hear anything about any of the consequences, unintended or intended, for that kind of yield. 200 bushel corn, that's pretty impressive. We eat a whole lot of corn sweetener and processed corn and a whole lot of different things. Plus 40% of that goes into ethanol by law. But what it does not talk about are all the concurrent consequences that come with that 200 bushel corn. The environmental consequences, the social consequences, the long-term resilience consequences. There are a lot of different things that are part and parcel to that 200 bushel corn. And if we're going to be honest about what we're doing and where we're going from here, we have to see that the circle has to go around the whole thing. It has to encompass water. It has to encompass, and we've just come back from Colorado. We have heard about water. The issues in the West with irrigation water are profound. The farmers in the San Luis Valley of Colorado are being told they have to recharge their aquifer by 2031, and they have not a clue how they're going to do that.
But they've also been told that if they don't recharge it, they're going to have their wells turned off, literally. And that can happen. Farmers are a minority. The public is demanding some changes, and the public has more votes. But to be honest, we're picking on conventional ag. We need to draw that same circle around our organic system.
And so we do.
And sometimes we're not happy with some of the things that were in that circle. And one thing that I like to point out to our fellow organic farmers at meetings is that organic soybeans are the organic farmer's dirty secret. Because soybeans produce very little organic matter. We don't always get cover crops on them in the fall, so they leave the soil exposed to erosion. And it's a lot of fun to blame the Corn Belt farmers for losing 2 pounds of soil for every pound of corn they grow. But maybe we should turn the finger the other way and ask how many pounds of soil are organic farmers losing. And I think soybeans is where we fall flat. And this is a place where there's some really exciting work being done now. Also energy, and that's why we were looking at solar on our farm. There are weaknesses in every system, and I think no matter how good a system is, there is room to make it better.
And so if you talk to anyone in government, they're going to define risk management as far as the insurance policies and programs that you can buy for ag insurance. For us, risk management means something entirely different. Risk management is predicated and grounded in diversity and flexibility. The only way we're going to adjust to changing conditions, the changing climate, changing availability of different inputs, and also in different markets, is to be as diverse as we can be. We have learned, as Klaas said, that diversity is the key to our being able to handle diseases, insects, and other issues. It's also the key to our being able to handle changes in who's buying what. What our available markets are, what our price is, whether or not we're going to be profitable. The more different crops we're growing, the more diversity we have, the better off we're going to be.
Another challenge I'd like to give our university is that we need to do more systems research. And if we turn the clock way back, and I love saying his name because Americans can't pronounce it, but Goethe, the German playwright, criticized the modern agricultural research that was being done in Germany, quote unquote, in the 1800s by saying that it was changing one variable and measuring one effect, while missing an almost infinite potential number of effects that variable was having. And we got very good. That's not a criticism of the scientific method as it was applied. But we got so good at doing that that we tended to miss some of the other effects that we're having. And I think in measuring yield, which was no question very important, we were missing the question is, are we affecting the future ability of that soil to produce crops by producing that crop now in the way that we are? Of course, that's going to come back to soil health pretty soon.
And that's a wonderful lead-in, because as we have been working in organic farming for the past 30 years, there's been something concurrent going on in American agriculture. And now suddenly everybody absolutely everybody is talking about soil health. And it's just kind of a funny thing because we were talking about it 30 years ago. But now you can't pick up a farm paper, a farm magazine, you can't pick up anything to do with agriculture without seeing articles about soil health, which is good. We're not all talking about the same thing. That isn't necessarily good, but at least we're talking. And at least we're recognizing that a major limitation in our resilience and in our productivity is the quality, the health of the soil. And there are a lot of reasons for this. Here are 8. You know, a healthy soil will hold more water in a dry year and drain better in a wet year. It'll resist erosion. It will provide more internally cycling nutrients, so not as many will need to be purchased, so that saves some money. It will be resistant to compaction. It will increase infiltration. I mean, there's so many good reasons to pay attention to the soil. Now, how we do that and what it means is the question. For those of you who have taken soil science within the past, years, you remember that soil is made up of 3 major components: physical, chemical, and biological. The physical part of it is the parent material. That's what you get when you buy a piece of land. The chemical is what you can amend, more or less. It's partly what you get with your parent material and then what you can buy and put on. And the biological is what lives there. And these are the microbes. This is the soil food web. These are the earthworms and all the other critters that are eating each other and eating organic matter and living on the roots. And some of them are pathogens. Most of them are not. And it is the diversity of life that is under our feet that we do not know anything. We do not see. You know, some people know a whole lot about it, but most of us don't see it, and therefore we don't think about it. And I was teaching a class at the community college years ago in biology, and I started talking about this and showing some really bizarre pictures of soil organisms. And one of the students came up to me with these starry eyes, just stunned, and she said, "I didn't know how much I didn't know." And I think this is really important, that we don't know how much we don't know. There's more diversity in a handful of soil life, or the life in the soil, than there is above ground. You know, most of the species in the soil have never been described. We don't know what they're doing there. We don't know how they're relating to each other. We don't know what's important. We don't know how, if we do this, tillage or pesticides, it's having an effect on this. But what we are coming to the conclusion about is, yes, the physical, the chemical are important, but the greatest of these is the biological. Our ability to have a healthy soil is the microbial life of the soil. And therefore, we need to treat it as if it is important. We have a friend up in Canada who's a grazing specialist, a dairy grazing specialist. She doesn't believe a farm can be healthy without cows. And we tell her that we agree, we have cows too, but we have a lot of other livestock. We tend them very carefully. We take good care of them. They're just really, really small. And I think it's very important to think of the life in our soil as if they were our livestock, because they are that important.
Well, until recently, we knew much more about what was out on the stars or the moon than we did about what was underground. And that may be overstating it a little, but not by much. But my personal opinion is one of the tragedies of the past 20 years has been the war between organic farmers and biotechnology. Here are our 2 natural allies. We need the tools that biotechnology brings us to understand what's in the soil. We can't even look at some of these organisms without killing them. Let's go forward. This picture was taken, actually, this is an interesting shot. It was taken in the 40s, we're guessing. The scientist was one of the worst Nazis in the Austrian education system. His widow actually published the work many years later. And what they did, they used stains and they used the tools that were available at the time to try to look at soil at this level. And they made some really interesting advances, which for me are mind-boggling, that with the crude tools they had and the limited capacity they had for doing research, that they were able to see as much as they were. Using stains, this professor's name was Sakara, was able to see that most of the soil life was an aquatic ecosystem. You know, we think of it being terrestrial, but when you get down to the microbial level, most things live in that water film that occupies the surface area.
There is more freshwater storage in soil on Earth than there is in all of the freshwater bodies of water combined.
So, and when we look at climate change, regulating water and storing carbon, look at the organism that does it. The soil is kind of a superorganism. I'm going to digress just a little bit and throw out another challenge to our researchers. When we talk about soil health, it's tempting to think that this is a 1 to 100 scale. That, you know, you can just make the soil healthier and healthier. I think we're missing the boat. And the reason I do is the most healthy environment for corn is not going to be the most healthy environment for rice. Those are extreme examples. But our goal really in soil health, aside from water regulation, storing carbon, you know, maintaining a balanced ecosystem, is that when we're growing a crop, we would like it to be the best adapted species for the conditions that exist in that soil. We have to recognize that every plant that grows is essentially farming a group of microbes in the ground. And I heard a really great talk, and I don't want to embarrass Dr. Van Es, but you made a very brilliant, reported on a very brilliant piece of work where you took soil health data and were able to predict which crops were going to do best. And I really think that's a direction that offers breakthroughs. If we could take a soil health test and from that test prescribe what cover crops to grow, what crop is likely to do best, and in real time, just like we do with chemical fertilizers, be able to say, do this now, and in so many months, you're going to have this field ready to do something. Or you've got a disease problem. This is the route you have to take to balance the biology so that that organism is not pathogenic. That has enormous possibilities, and this world is just opening up. I was asked to be on an advisory board for a Silicon Valley company called Trace Genomics. And I remember Janet Thies doing work on this with much cruder tools 30 years ago. But now they can take a soil sample and put it in this analyzer and sequence the entire genome of all the organisms in that soil. And an interesting observation they've made with that technology, they're saying whether or not the pathogens are present is not a good indicator of whether you're going to have pathogenicity. It has to do with who else is there.
There's a lot we don't know. And there's a lot we can't, as ordinary farmers, be able to tell. We count on our researchers to help us with this. But one of the things we can do is take a handful of soil, squeeze it, and then relax and let it and see how it falls. If it falls with crumbs and looks healthy and looks loose, that means it has stable aggregates, and that's a pretty good indication of a healthy microbial population. It's not exact, but it's something we can do on our farm. If we squeeze it and we let loose and it looks pasty and it sticks together and it looks kind of compacted, then we should be looking at doing different techniques. We need to be giving our microbes more to eat and perhaps a different approach to tilling. And before we get into other topics, actually, this is not where it's supposed to be. We'll come back to that. I'm sorry. To improve soil health, some general principles is to improve the soil physical condition, the drainage. In New York, most places need additional drainage. And we've put in miles and miles and miles of tile drains and diversion ditches and other ways of reducing erosion and improving internal drainage in our soil. Getting more cycling high quality organic matter in the soil will give our microbes something to eat. And so cover cropping, leaving residue, not scalping the fields of every last bit of green. This is going to feed our microbes. And then we correct the nutrients, and then we buy the products. Too many people have gone out and put a lot of money into what is commonly known as a bug in a jug. There are a lot of products out there, many of which are organically approved, that have all sorts of fun microorganisms in them in a nice gallon, and you mix them into your sprayer and spray them on, and life's good. The trouble is, if you build it, they will come. If you don't build it, they will die. And I think it's very important that all of us realize that just buying a solution in a jug does not solve the problems.
I'm looking for the first salesman who comes along selling a bug in a jug who tells me to leave a control strip. And therein is this intersection of biotechnology and organic farming. I believe we're not far from where we can take a genomic look at the soil and predict fairly accurately if some of these microbes are going to be of benefit, or even if they're likely to take hold and do anything. Because if they're already there, it won't pay to put them on. Or if the conditions are hostile to them, it probably won't pay either. You know, this is a way that we can start fine-tuning our inputs in a way that they're a lot more effective, a lot more cost-effective. And it's another place where the university has the potential to add tremendous value to agriculture.
The good thing about organics is that there are markets for lots of different crops. And they're good, profitable markets. They're markets that are reliable. What we have tried to help the farmers that we work with do is to develop a repertoire, to get some ideas of what, at different windows of opportunity throughout a 12-month period, what they could be planting, what they could be harvesting, what they could be plugging a short-term cover crop in if they've got 6 weeks of bare ground, how they can be using their soil more wisely to both produce more profitable crops, but also produce in the off times crops that will help enhance the quality of their soil and feed their microbes. We don't tell them what, you know, this is our crop rotation, therefore this works, try do it. We don't want people to use ours as a template, but what's more important is to build their own repertoire and then choose from it when they have windows of opportunity. The fun thing is, back 2 years ago, at the end of the season in November, I sat Klaas and Peter down at the kitchen table and I said, okay, what did we grow this year? And we started listing it off. And we listed off corn. Well, we grew corn for food because we have some open pollinated corn. And we grew some for distilling because we had a small market for that. Most of it went for feed, but we did grow some for seed because we were working with Margaret Smith at the time on hybrid production. And so we listed all the different crops and all the different uses. And it just kept going and going and going. Down toward the end, we sort of switched over to the things we raise for our own use because we try to be as self-sufficient on our farm as possible and eat as much of our own food as we can. But this is our risk management. This diversity of crop and market is why we can roll with what comes. Because if one thing's down, something else will be up.
I'd like to share a fun observation. We started growing rye as a winter cover, and then we discovered it did a little better if we put some tillage radish in with it. In fact, we found our wheat yields went up if we put just a pound or so of tillage radish seed in the fall. And then why wouldn't the cover crop do better? So we threw the tillage radish in the rye. We also put the Austrian winter peas in the rye, which produced nitrogen for it. And then we discovered how delicious the tillage radishes are and
how delicious the Austrian winter pea shoots are in the spring. So you can have your cover crop and eat it too.
And have you ever had the frustration of growing radishes in the spring and they get these bugs in them and there's so much work and they have weeds in them? And I walked around trying to kick myself. When we threw those tillage radishes in the fall into that mix, there were no weeds, there were no bugs, there was no weeding labor. We could just go out and catch and pick our vegetables. In fact, there is a market for this. And in the spring, the Austrian winter peas are the first high-value green salad crop that you can get. Again, we're getting all the benefits of the cover crop, and we're also growing vegetables in a way that requires virtually no labor. So it's interesting how we can learn things. There's always a better way to do something, no matter how good we think we are at what we're doing.
And some real energetic, intense young people from Stone Barns Research Center down in the Hudson Valley come up every fall to harvest not just our tillage radishes, but rye shoots, and then take it back and turn it into all sorts of delicious things at the restaurant. We have so much fun.
It's amazing what people are willing to come out and pay for a salad made out of rye. Well, I thought it was pretty good, but when you pay that much, it tastes better. Well, we learned, and from this, we learned something that's even more important. We're getting really variable climate. We've got much wider swings than we used to have. And in a recent bitter cold spell that killed almost everything, we discovered that where we had the mixture of the tillage radish, the Austrian winter pea, and the rye, and I think we're going to be throwing kale into that mix in the near future, and turnips. But the rye formed almost like a remay, and none of the tillage radishes were harmed. So where the tillage radishes were growing unprotected, they were done. And yet where they were in the mixture, they survived and continued to produce biomass and protect the soil and grow for about another 5 or 6 weeks afterwards. So these mixtures have tremendous benefit. Another thing we noticed was that when you grow the Austrian winter peas by themselves, they're subject to winter damage. And it's easy to misconstrue this as saying they can't tolerate cold. But when they're mixed with a small grain, again, that gives cover and keeps the wind off, we discovered that their damage is really desiccation, not absolute cold. And when they have the protection of the small grain, the winter peas survive fine, even at 10 below zero. It has more to do with this desiccation effect. So this is all seeing what we're looking at and being open to learning new things. It's amazing how much fun we can have just growing cover crops.
Most of the professors here in this room have done research on our farm. You students may not know that. And we try to offer our farm up as a living lab, an actual organic farm where authentic research can be done under organic conditions. One of the research projects we're in right now is with Matt Ryan, and it is on organic no-till. We have done a lot of research on this, and a lot more is yet to come. But trying to come up with ways to reduce tillage, to reduce soil disturbance, and still get weed control, which is a challenge in organics, without being able to cultivate, and get good quality crops, which can be a real challenge if we don't have good weed control. So there were a lot of factors that need to be covered in order to have this actually be effective. We've been working with folks at Rodale to come up with equipment, and then fine-tuning that, because Southern Pennsylvania is not upstate New York, and some of the timing is different for what worked in Pennsylvania and what works in upstate New York. Here's a little movie, and this shows something kind of neat. If you just wait, hopefully. Here comes the roller. And the roller is rolling down a combination of rye and Austrian winter peas. This is in May, right? May? May.
And the And winter peas are about 7 feet tall.
And
They grow upright a lot better when they have something to climb on.
it's being rolled down and being crimped, and the stems are broken, but now just wait for it. Behind the tractor is the grain drill. The soybeans are being planted. So in one pass, we are rolling down the rye, crimping it, making sure that it stays down, and then we are planting the soybeans. This is one of the ways we've done this. Last year, we actually mowed off some of the rye and the triticale and planted into undisturbed soil, but it had been mowed off because we were needing the forage. We have also tried rolling down and then coming back about a week later, or planting and then coming back about a week later and rolling it down. There are a lot of different techniques of doing this. The bottom line is we can do it. We can roll this rye down, let it die. It makes a mat in the middle of the rows. It covers up where the weeds would come. The soybeans come up through it, and the soybeans yield well as long as there's sufficient moisture.
Made several really interesting and valuable observations with this practice. And one was that we've had terrible problems with deer. We've got some fields where we almost can't grow soybeans because of the deer damage. What we found was deer hate getting their eyes poked by rye heads. And when we crimp the rye down, sometimes it stays down, but usually there's that annoying habit of bouncing back up a little bit. We do sometimes recrimp it, but that annoying bounce back is not that hard to look at when you realize that when the deer go out there to eat your soybeans and they get their eyes poked, it discourages them. And we've seen a huge reduction in damage from the deer just because we have the rye out there. It really seems to frustrate our predators.
Deer will come for miles to eat organic soybeans. I mean, this is a documented fact. And there are some fields that we had pretty much given up on growing soybeans on. But by doing this particular practice on those fields, like this one, which is all surrounded by woods, and it's kind of down in a hollow, and growing soybeans would have been impossible before we tried doing this. We are actually getting some pretty good soybeans.
The other benefit is you can have these really heavy rains that climate change is bringing us that damage the soil tremendously, and walk across those fields and not get your boots dirty the next day. You know, that is huge. Also, you look at the water that's pouring out of the fields and it's clean instead of muddy. You know, just think of the environmental benefits to that. But waiting until fall, and fall after soybeans is when I really cringe at the soil loss and at the soil structure damage. We've got this nice thatch of rye that's still there, still protecting it. And we have found that it's very effective to no-till either rye or triticale. And what we've started no-tilling is triticale and winter peas into that mulch. And we're getting the protection. Again, notice the protection that I noticed of the rye. When we're doing no-till and we have a stubble sticking up, that stubble gives protection to the small grain. You know, there are some downsides, for instance, if it's tying up nitrogen, and those can be managed. We just have to be aware of them and manage them. But I think there's a tremendous potential for making our grains winter better and having better yields just from the protective effect of keeping wind and heavy rain events, or at least the damage from them, at minimum.
The good thing is we know where the end of the rainbow is. And this is not, I don't say this lightly, we really do. At the end of the day, you know, hopefully there's a financially stable farm, an environmentally stable farm that is able to adapt to the changing whims of weather, which we can't avoid, markets, costs, you know, things that go wrong, and still have fun. We said this at a meeting of conventional farmers about 3 years ago. And when I said, and still have fun, the heads went up all over like, what's that? If we cannot be doing this and having fun, why do it? We are very fortunate. We feel very blessed that we've been able to do this with our family. one son working with Klaas, one son working with me, and our daughter just an hour down the road. We feel very fortunate to be surrounded by a neighborhood of old order Mennonites who are our friends, our neighbors. When we had a fire a year and a half ago of a major barn burned, within hours they were there to help us clean up and rebuild, and they put in weeks, months of free labor to help us rebuild. That's what neighborhood is. We have a community of people who we work with, that we are friends with, that we've been friends with for a long time. We have a group through Cornell called NYCO that gets together and was just together day before yesterday. We didn't get there, but up in Geneva. And it's a group of farmers, organic farmers from this area that have been getting together for nearly 30 years. Fun is people, and fun is feeling like what we're doing is worthwhile and is ethical. And we have been really fortunate. We have a lot of our articles that we've written over the years on various agronomic topics, and including a bunch of ones on animal topics too, because through the mill we have to answer a lot of questions on fun things like mastitis and Johne's disease. And they're posted on our website under info. And we have 5 minutes left to take questions.
I want to throw out one more observation. That's a lot of farmers, the next generation doesn't want to be farmers. And I think the problem, we can say it's not fun or it's not profitable, but I think the bigger problem is most young people want to do their own thing. There aren't a whole lot of young people who say, my dream is to take over mom and dad's, or mom and dad's vision or mom and dad's project. Everyone wants to do their own. And I think as farms get bigger, we have a tendency to build these units where there's not room for the next generation to be their own person and live their own dream. And I really would like to encourage anyone to make room for this next generation to express themselves and try new things. Questions?
How much does this depend on having good prices and stable market for the organic products? And the reason I ask is, say there was a conventional farmer that likes a lot of the principles you're doing, and wants to try more mix and all this various parts of it, but doesn't want to go completely certified organic now. Would this work, or would it not work unless you had that specialized market with those specialized prices and buyers?
It is dependent on getting prices for your crops that covers your costs. The organic price was a lot higher than it is now. About 5-10 years ago, it's come down, and it's still profitable. It's not as profitable, but it is adequately profitable. Unfortunately, for many conventional farmers, their crops aren't even meeting the cost of production. Yes.
Our cost of production is gone. Our cost of production is down. When you take it per bushel or per ton, we have actually lowered our cost of production.
So to answer your question, as long as the prices being paid exceed the cost of production adequately to allow a little bit of additional money, then it would probably work. But that's a big if in conventional ag.
Well, and it's highly management dependent. Where we have really saved on our cost of production is nitrogen. We have a farming system where all of the nitrogen is being generated internally, and that's a tremendous savings. We're also, our cost of cultivating, even with this high technology, is much lower than our cost of herbicides and technology fees before would have been. So we've got some significant savings. We do have some higher costs, but we've been fortunate to be able to hold our yields so that they're actually higher than they were when we farmed conventionally. And in certain crops like oats, they're substantially higher than conventional yields.
Other questions? Yes, Chuck.
Yeah, I was wondering, your roll down cover crops and then planting soybeans into them. You seem to have low wheat not that many weeds in the soybeans, at least from the pictures. And I'm wondering, to what extent do you think that that is a result of decades of good weed control before you attempt to use up the
I think the weed control is maybe not as good historically as you give us credit for. But the big thing I'm seeing is that the cultural practices set you up for how many weeds germinate. And this is an area that I think a graduate student could make a tremendous career out of, is there are triggers that make weeds either go into deep dormancy or that bring the weed seeds out of dormancy in large numbers. And what we're finding is with our farming system and our crop sequence, when we plant the rye ahead of soybeans, we're at a point when the weeds are in relatively deep dormancy. So that even if we have a moderate seed bank of weeds, they're really not germinating at that point in the rotation, or at least where they're going to impact that crop. One observation our son made here in the last several years is when we grow triticale and winter peas as a winter cover and then take it as a forage crop, we have virtually no weeds for a month afterwards, no matter what we're planting. And I've had people look at our dry beans and saying, what have you got here, some kind of organic herbicide? And no, it's just in that particular situation, that cycle in the cropping sequence, the weeds are in such a deep dormancy that they don't come. I don't care if they try to come afterwards because they won't make it. So I think in your question, there is the potential for a really interesting project.
Other question? Yes.
So first of all, thanks for coming. It's so important that we get perspective from people like you. And for those of you who don't know Klaas and Mary that well, they really are celebrities in the organic agriculture world, I mean, nationally and internationally. So we're lucky to have you. Two comments. So one on Klaas's comment about the technology, the GPS and all that. So we are in the process of hiring a person in what we call digital agronomy, and you are more than welcome to participate in that process. We can link you in on the seminars. I mean, of course, you can attend in person, but we can link you in so that you can stay at home as well.
Thank you.
So
we had better internet.
Okay, well, we can find a solution.
Our next project is actually to dig in more than a mile of fiber optic cable because Verizon will not give us decent service.
Oh, wow.
Under any circumstances.
And they're supposed to do that according to the governor.
They claim they're giving us excellent service, but the truth is somewhere else.
So could I ask you a question though, because you're mostly an organic grain operation, so you export a lot of your carbon and nutrients in a way, right? So I know you're growing your own nitrogen, you're growing a lot of your own carbon. How do you deal with kind of replenishing those other nutrients?
Well, we aren't mostly a grain operation. We grow a lot of grain and forages, but we also work with 3 adjacent dairy farms where we board their heifers and their dry cows. We get all of their manure back. We provide them with all their forages, all their straw. There's a great deal of cycling of nutrients, of materials, of cows, of labor, of money. We have tried to use our farm to expand the land base for 3 young farms in our area who don't have large land base. It gives Klaas his cow fix every day, which is really important for mental health. But it also means that we are getting a lot of manure back. We are keeping a lot of the nutrients in a closed loop that may leave our farm physically for a few months, but come back to our farm.
And actually, therein is a production increase from our land base, because that milk and that meat that is coming from those dairy farms is mostly being produced by the products of our cover crops. So that we're double cropping almost the entire farm in one way or other, so that when we harvest our winter wheat or we harvest our spelt, then we also get the straw, which these farmers can have for free as long as I get it back when it's dirty. And we're also harvesting the cover crop afterwards, which is very high quality forage. And I would contend that nobody under even the most efficient conditions could grow monoculture alfalfa as cheaply as we can produce that forage as a cover crop, because we're dividing the cost of that land by 2 crops.
For us, it makes a lot of sense. And we've talked to a lot of people about this model, and we're actually thinking about putting together a grant proposal to kind of codify it and describe it and turn it into more of a template. It works really well in neighborhoods where there are both small dairy farms and also grain farms, because there are so many synergies that transcend the individual parts. The sum is so much greater. And it's also a great way to help young farmers get started in kind of a sheltered environment where these farms know that they've got the top quality forage, the top quality grain, and lots of straw. So the risks of starting out a dairy farm are a whole lot less. It's a pretty nice system, and it's something that I think more and more farms could see this as a way of being a community resource rather than each individual farm as being an island to itself.
There's several ways this strengthens the biology of our farm. One is that we're able to grow BMR sorghum Sudan during the summer, when there are periods when the soil otherwise might only have weeds or a less productive cover crop. And by having all this diversity, we're taking advantage of the differences between C3 crops and C4 crops. We're able to grow crops that will start growing at 40 degrees Fahrenheit or even colder during the cool fall and spring months, and then switching to C4 crops that can tolerate high temperatures and make much more efficient water use during midsummer. So I believe we're actually capturing a lot more carbon out of the atmosphere and producing a lot more food just by having the farm have a large amount of the optimally adapted species for the time of year through more of the year.
And lest you think of us as grain farmers, at any given time, we do have 75 to 80 cows on our farm. So that really does kind of define us too. Anything else?
I think we're almost out of time here, so there are no more questions. I think we should just thank Klaas and Mary Howell-Martens.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.